What's up, guys? Hunter Y with the Wildman Saga here, and a very common question I get is, how do I get started bow fishing? You see people out there with $1,000 bow and reel combos on a $30,000 boat shooting fish, and people think that's what you need to have in order to bow fish. But that's just not the case. So in these next few videos, I'm going to be showing y'all how I started bow fishing and how you guys can start bow fishing too and be successful. In our first video, we'll be discussing the equipment that you'll need to start, and we'll be going over the equipment that I use and that I recommend. First started bow fishing, I was probably 8-9 years old, and I didn't have any of the proper equipment. I actually started with this old wooden recurve, and I would go to a creek by my house, and I would take old aluminum arrows that didn't have any fletching on them, and I would shoot carp and chase them up and down the river because I didn't have any string or anything tied to the arrows. It was fun when I was a kid, but I wouldn't recommend doing this because you lose a lot of arrows and a lot of fish. So that just wasn't the most viable way to go about bow fishing. I eventually upgraded to another recurve that had a mount for a reel on it, and then I worked up to what I have now. We'll start off talking about the arrows that you'll need for bow fishing. Now, you're going to want to use special bow fishing arrows. When I started off, like I said, I used aluminum arrows, and those just didn't cut it. They were too light, they didn't go in the water very well, they weren't barbed, lost a lot of fish, didn't have a place to tie my line. But with these bow fishing arrows, all that's solved. They're a heavier fiber arrow, so they get very good water penetration with the weight. They have barbed tips on them, and that stops the fish from coming out. And you can do two ways. I highly recommend having a safety slide on your arrow. This keeps your arrow from, if the line gets caught, the arrow bouncing back, and you have your safety stop right there. If you don't want to use a safety stop for whatever reason, there's a hole pre-drilled in bow fishing arrows right there where my safety stop is screwed in, and you just tie your line through there and make sure it goes through your arrow rest before you shoot. Again though, highly recommend getting that safety slide. It just saves a lot of trouble. Just one less thing you have to remember to do, keep that line in your arrow rest, and I just think it's a lot easier to use them. Moving on to the actual bow part of bow fishing. I use the PSE Discovery 2. It's a bow that's made for bow fishing. It's made specifically for bow fishing. It's a compound bow, but it doesn't have any let off. So most compound bows, when you get it drawn back, the weight decreases and it breaks over to a point so you can hold it back easier. A lot of bow fishing bows don't have that, so you have the ability to do half draw shots, quarter draw shots, without having to worry about drawing it back to break. And it allows you to shoot faster, get fish that you wouldn't get otherwise. That's why I prefer this. It's more like shooting a recurve, but you get the power of a compound bow. Now, you can use pretty much any bow to bow fish. Old compound bows that you used for hunting a while ago that you aren't using anymore, even your hunting bow that you use now, if you just slap a reel on it, you're good to go. Most arrow rests will accommodate bow fishing arrows. They're a little heavy for whisker biscuits, so if you are using a whisker biscuit, it can warp that and wouldn't make it good for hunting anymore, so I wouldn't recommend using a whisker biscuit when bow fishing. There are a lot of different kinds of reels that you can use when bow fishing. I first started off, whenever I first actually got bow fishing stuff, and not just aluminum arrows and an old recurve, was I had a PSE Kingfisher. Now it's a all aluminum recurve bow, and the reel I had for it was a Cajun Archery, just wind up reel that didn't have an actual reel on it. It was just a spool that came out from the arrow rest, and you had to manually wrap the line around it. Now, that worked okay whenever I was 10 and wasn't shooting many fish, but it took a lot of time to do that and was just kind of annoying. I would personally, if you didn't want to spend a lot of money on a really nice like AMS retriever or something like that, you can get a Zebco 33 braided line, a reel seat, and that's going to cost you like 20 bucks more than if you were to get just one of those spools. So I would highly recommend spending that extra 20 bucks to get a Zebco 33 and a reel seat. It would save you a lot of headache and a lot of time. Now, if you do get those Zebco 33s with a reel seat or something similar to that, Cajun Archery makes something similar, AMS makes something similar, those just screw in to your stabilizer port on any bow. So any bow that you have that has a stabilizer port, you can slap on a reel seat, just screws in like a stabilizer, and your reel mounts right into that. Now, what I use is an AMS Retriever Pro. I love this reel. So as you can see, it mounts to the side of your bow here, and it doesn't have, so one of the issues that I had when I did have a Zebco 33 that I used for a little bit. My biggest problem was I would forget to open up the bail. So when you open up the bail on those, you have to remember to click the button before every time you shoot. And I would have an issue forgetting to do that, and I'd try to shoot and my arrow would go nowhere and it would tear up my reel. With this, you don't have to worry about that. The line just freely comes out when you're not doing anything to it. You don't have to worry about opening up that bail. It just comes out. So you don't have to think about anything before you shoot. Then after you shoot, you have this right here. That puts pressure down on the line with a roller, and then you can reel it in and the line won't come out anymore. So that just saves a lot of time, a lot of headache when you're shooting, because it sucks to get a big fish in your sights, you shoot, and your arrow doesn't go anywhere. It's happened to me several times back whenever I used a Zebco 33 style, but it worked just fine. And if you don't want to drop the extra money to get an AMS Retriever, those Zebco 33s work great. Now, the arrow rest is something that I would recommend getting something that's fully wrapped around like this AMS is here. And like I said earlier, don't use a whisker biscuit. These arrows are too heavy. They'll tear them up. You won't get accurate shots with them anymore. But something like this, it's nice to have the full wrap around, so you're not using like a drop away or something like that, because when you're getting angled shots on fish, it's really easy for that arrow to come up a little bit, not sit right in there. So if you are using a drop away or something like that, your arrow can bounce out and it just gets nasty at that point. But these fully wrapped around ones, it keeps that from happening. So even if it does bounce up a little bit, you'll still get a fairly accurate shot, and your chances of missing go down a lot. Now, there's a lot of great bow fishing bows on the market right now. You have your Oneida Ospreys, your PSE Discoveries, your PSE Waves, Bass Pro brand, their Arch Enemy bows. Those are actually really nice. I have several friends that bow fish with those. You have a lot of options with traditional bow fishing bows, and you also have so many options of various recurve bows that have stabilizer mounts in them. Pretty much every hunting bow has a stabilizer mount in them that you can do a reel in. One of my bow fishing buddies, he hunts with an old Bear hunting bow from like the early 90s. Kind of a crappy bow, but it works well for bow fishing for him. So, finding the bow fishing bow, not a problem at all. You can do that really cheap. You can find old compound bows for 40 bucks online. You can find used reels. You can find used Zebco 33s for like 10 bucks online. You can get a reel seat for 10 bucks at any archery shop. The arrows are actually kind of expensive. Most arrows run you 15 to 20 bucks for a fully set up arrow. So that's going to be one of the more expensive parts of a bow fishing setup. So you can get into bow fishing very, very cheap and be successful. A lot of people are concerned about the boat and finding the fish, But if you continue to follow this series, I'm going to show you guys how to find fish in creeks and lakes and rivers without needing a boat, just wading, walking on the shore. That's how I started off. That was my bread and butter when I was a kid, walking along creeks, shooting fish all day. I didn't have a fancy boat. I didn't have even a kayak to use. I just went out, walked knee deep in the water, and would shoot 50 fish in a day. So you can be successful in a very limited budget, and I hope you follow this series to know how to do that. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of these videos, and stay safe and stay wild.